Welcome to our session and thank you for joining us. Today we'll present the Student Success Framework for IT and its impact on retention. Today's speakers will be myself. My name is Alice Dinu. I am the VP of Student Success and Research at EDUCAUSE. And I also have the pleasure to be joined by Dr. Christine Deacons from Eastern Michigan, who's the Director of Academic Support Programs at Holman Success Center. Today's agenda is to share our Student Success Framework for digital engagement and its impact on retention. And then Dr. Deacons will also share the implementation process of the framework as a case study at Eastern Michigan University. So EDUCAUSE wanted to tackle the education and engagement challenge through a student success framework that drives repeatable student outcomes like retention, student well-being, and engagement. This framework is currently being used by over 350 institutions, from community colleges to four-year institutions, from small to large. And the goal of the framework was to build a sustainable and holistic approach to keep your students engaged and retained. The first layer of the framework is decentralization. We fundamentally believe that it's crucial to reduce information barriers that we create by having hundreds of web pages that students need to navigate and disseminate noise versus signal. The first step was to centralize all essential campus information into a seamless experience where students can get events, services, clubs, and more, all within 2 simple clicks. There is also crucial academic and financial information that lies behind systems such as the LMS as well as the SIS. So we natively integrate to adhere to decentralization ethos and bring information like courses, grades, and financial aid status at students' fingertips. We are living in a world that is social, where information alone is not enough. Community is a crucial component. It's interesting to observe that today's students' first social interactions are digital first, and that after are translated into in-person. And there is so much research out there that emphasizes how sense of belonging and peer-to-peer interactions are crucial to retention and students' well-being. So this is the reason why we added a community layer where students can interact, ask questions, and make friends. It's interesting to note that information and community are the building blocks of creating an engagement loop. And that's exactly what we've done. We are increasing engagement and building healthy engagement habits where students access the app daily to find information and keep up with their friends. We're also interested to measure digital engagement as well as in-person engagement. So when we're moving from the engagement layer to the assessment layer, we wanted to measure attendance at services and events at scale. And what's also unique about that is that we added a feedback layer to it where we can measure student satisfaction at those campus experiences. The next layer is the intervention layer. And we know that interventions don't work if we don't capture students' attention. And all those building blocks that we just talked about are meant to just do that, capture students' attention. And when we have engagement data, we can actually tailor and personalize those interventions. So what's interesting here is that we have data across the entire pyramid, and we can intervene with students who are not engaged. All those components make up the student success infrastructure to drive student outcomes like engagement, well-being, and retention. And because we have data across all these pillars, we wanted to understand the impact of the framework on retention. So we conducted longitudinal research across many institutions and followed freshmen for over 4 years to see how their behavior correlates with retention. And here's what we found. We found that students who, freshmen that have the app, have a probability of 84% of retaining year over year, while non-app users have a probability of retaining of only 16%. What this means is that students who are engaged with campus community and campus resources have a retention improvement of over 425% compared to students who are not on the platform. And really, students who are not on the platform it's a signal that it's an early alert signal that they are at high risk. So we wanted to also dig a little bit further to see how can the digital engagement from the app, can it actually predict retention? And the answer is yes, it can. A single semester of app engagement data was actually 20% better at predicting retention than historical institutional models. We have partnered with Columbia University's computational social scientists, and we built 3 prediction models. The first prediction model was an institutional model that included data sets like academic data like GPA, demographic data, are they Pell eligible, are they first generation, what ethnicity are they, and so on. And we were able to predict if students are staying or dropping out at 69% accuracy level. And we have built a second model that includes app engagement data of the framework that we just discussed. And we found that behavior alone is more predictive, particularly at 83%. And when we combine both models, the app engagement data, as well as with the institutional data, the prediction rate went up to 88%, which is fascinating. All that is possible because students actually use our platform. A technology that is not being used is not helpful. Our student success team, what we're doing is that we're focusing on ensuring that you have high student adoption. On average, across over 350 institutions, we are able to onboard 90% of freshmen within 3 weeks of launch and 80% of the entire enrollment within the first semester. So now I would like to unpack you the reasons why we're getting all those results. So I would like to focus on the summer engagement first and its impact on retention and how the first 3 layers of the framework improve the student experience. We all know that freshmen are more prone to higher levels of stress since they haven't yet formed their social support groups, and college is an unknown environment with new expectations. So one way that we help students transition from high school to college is to first help them familiarize with campus resources before they arrive on campus, like orientation calendars, a list of their student leaders, and other important information. But most impactful, we help the freshmen build social connections before their orientation starts. And we have countless of stories of students introducing themselves on a campus wall and making friends. So you might be wondering, why is this important? And the reason why is because it impacts retention. So freshmen who join the platform during the summer period before their first day of class are found to be 2 times more likely to retain than students who are not on the platform. And what's happening here is that freshmen on the app benefit on those early social connections and that are facilitated through the platform and their increased familiarity with campus resources. Now, let's move on what's happening during this semester and academic year and its impact on retention. And particularly, are we focusing on the engagement and assessment layer and its significant role that plays on retention. One key challenges of campuses is a fragmented student experience, and how we keep students engaged is by connecting students to the right information and helping them find the right resource like events, services on campus. In addition, we also complete the loop by measuring student experience through attendance tracking in events and services like advisors and financial aid. And most importantly, we help capture students' feedback at scale to improve services and listen to the students' voice by taking the campus pulse regularly. So we learn that freshmen that attend 5 events and more a semester have a probability of 95% rate of persisting year over year. What this means is that their drop rate is 4 times lower than students who don't attend any events. And we also found that the app engagement drives about 2.5 times higher attendance rate than other promotional strategies like posters on social media. We're also interested to assess what is the impact of satisfaction on retention. And the traditional way of gathering students' satisfaction is through a one-time long survey semester that yields about 25 to 35% response rates. And the survey is meant to assess student satisfaction as activities happen a month ago. So one of the things that we've done is that we flipped the model and we focused on taking short campus pulses in real time at point of service throughout the entire semester instead. So one of the things that we've done is that we're able to increase the student response rates from 25% to 90% consistently. And this data is across 1 million interaction between 2019 and 2020. We actually found that students who are rating 3 stars and below are also more likely to drop out than students who are rating a 1 star. Particularly students who are rating 3 stars and below, their probability of retaining is between 40 to 45%. So now let's talk about virtual engagement. And this is it's really interesting because of the world that we're living in today. And even if we're living in a social distance world, we still need to create those experiences that make students feel connected. So the campus community is key. We have provided an environment where students can ask questions, make friends within the institution's umbrella. And by doing this, students are actually answering each other's questions, and they would typically do when they're in a hallway. And we found that they can get an answer within 10 minutes or less because of how dense the community is. And what this does, it actually saves the institution about 400 hours of staff hours of semester throughout by crowdsourcing their own community. In addition to the public community, there is also a peer-to-peer chat to form those close relationships. And we are also interested to understand how these private community impacts retention. So we have partnered with Columbia University, and we wanted to understand how to measure the health of the campus social network and its impact on retention. We have taken a methodology called the centrality methodology. It's a methodology that was used by social networks like Facebook and Instagram to measure the health of their social network characteristics. And we wanted to bring that model into higher ed and see if it's applicable to retention. So what you see on the left is basically a representation of a campus social graph of one of our campuses, where the blue dots are the students who are retaining and the yellow dots are the students who are dropping out. The line in between is the frequency of messages sent from students to students. And we built a centrality score that can actually identify isolated as well as hyper-connected students. And for instance, we found that students like Emma and Shane that are close to the core of the campus social graph and have a high centrality score have a higher probability of retaining, specifically at 92%. And students on the periphery of the social graph like Jude that have a lower centrality score have also a lower retention probability. So what's interesting here is that for the first time, we're able to measure how socially connected students are with their campus community, and we can identify students who are isolated. And we have proven how virtual communities on the app can socially connect students, and it's associated with retention and continued enrollment. So now it's time to welcome Dr. Christine Deacons from Eastern Michigan that will share her implementation best practices as a case for the student success framework.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Christine Deacons. I am Director of Academic Support Programs at Eastern Michigan University. So in my area, we cover tutoring, SI, all kinds of academic support, and we work with some vulnerable populations of at-risk students. So Eastern is a four-year public institution. We have enrollment of about 21,000 students, but really our undergraduate enrollment is closer to about 13,000. We're representing 40 countries and 46 states. 66% of our students are full-time and 92% of them live in state. We are definitely your typical regional institution. 21% live on campus, although if you were to draw a radius around campus of like just a mile or two, that would encompass just about 90% of our students. And 68% of our students receive need-based financial aid. So we have a considerable population of Pell eligible students. So we were really faced with the challenge of, how do we best support our at-risk students? And so as we approach our work, we utilize some theoretical frameworks. And most of them are focused on engagement theory and collectivist culture. So we know that it's really important for students to be engaged. If you, any research, Tinto and Aston and Q and all of those guys talk about the importance of engagement and student success. And we know that students who aren't engaged tend to drop out at higher rates. So we've really focused on that as one aspect of our programming. And the other one is that we found that a lot of our students, particularly our more vulnerable students, tend to come from collectivist cultures. And so what that really means to us is, our regular admit traditional students tend to land on campus and they can muddle through things okay. They'll figure things out. If they hit a roadblock, they'll kind of wiggle around and figure out how to get through stuff. Students from our more collectivist cultures, they're used to community. And so when they are leaving their communities, their homes, a lot of them, as I mentioned, are first generation. So they don't have a lot of parental advice on how to navigate college. And they're dropping in on campus with no support network whatsoever. And so we find that it's those students who really, really struggle to navigate our campus culture and the networks on campus that you need to navigate to be successful, financial aid and how do I find help and who do I ask about this, all those sorts of things. And those students really seem to struggle. So the one nice thing, the thing that we noticed immediately from the app, actually I want to back up and tell you that before I jump into the building community piece, that the reason that we initially looked at purchasing the app was because we needed a good, effective way to track participation. And I'm going to get into that in more detail later in another slide. But once we adopted the app, the biggest thing that happened was there was an immediate and organic building of a campus community. So you saw this screenshot earlier, Alice used it, but something that we saw with our students is we introduced them to the app when they come to campus in the spring for orientation and to register for classes. And you can tell that they're very excited to come to college, but they're also extremely anxious and nervous. And so you see them getting into the app, making friends, asking questions, and you see existing students coming in and answering. It's very much a student-driven conversation. And what we realized was that by the time August rolls around, you could see in their conversations the level of anxiety had really dropped. And we think that's really made a difference in who ends up actually enrolling and landing on campus and eventually persisting. It was interesting, a few years ago, we actually had a large group of students who met up through the app and ended up having this huge picnic it was like between 20 and 40 students met at Heath Beach, which is near campus, about 20 miles outside of campus, for a huge picnic before anybody even moved in. So it's really been a great tool for building campus community. As I mentioned before, the main driving reason why we were looking for an app was so that we could assess and track the supports that we provide. We know that having structured support is really important for the population of students that we serve. Academically at-risk students are usually at risk for a reason, and typically it's because they, don't have the best study skills or follow through time management organization. So we have our program is very structured, and we needed to be able to measure attendance at things like study tables, meeting with success coaches, attending supplemental instruction and drop-in tutoring, and meeting with peer academic coaches or attending workshops. And the nice thing about the app is it does that. It's a seamless process. We used to take pen and paper attendance, and it was so inefficient and so inaccurate. So it's really nice. Students just scan in and scan out. We have an accurate record of who went where and when. And the other thing is it's allowed us to make some in-flight corrections around some of the services that we provide based on student feedback. So we adjusted our book loan program. We were able to bring more computers into our study table space, adjusted our times when we are open to serve students. And for study tables alone last year, we had 161,000 visits with 90% real-time feedback. So this is another example of just some of the feedback we've received. And I said it's always nice to receive good feedback, but the more important feedback is the bad stuff that we hear about, so that we are able to make those in-flight corrections that we know are so necessary. So one of the things that we've been working on is developing interventions, providing the right information to the right groups of students at the right time. So we've really looked at mapping interventions across the student life cycle. And this is the piece that Alice alluded to that we worked on with Duke Health. We've identified intervention categories that kind of connect to the domains that we know really drive student success: academic, financial, engagement, and mental health. And so some of the things that we're working on for this fall are nudges that we can send out to students for the ones who haven't completed their FAFSA application by the deadline, the ones that don't have their bills paid when the bills are due, the ones pushing out notifications as to when they can add and drop. We've shared COVID-19 information and also scholarship information. So this is the mental health intervention kind of mapping that was done with Duke Health. And so what they did was they looked at the first year journey that the students go through and all of the well-being milestones that we hit. And then they created a bunch of tiles, interventions that pop up as tiles within the app that range from anything from just a little tutorial about maybe what to do when you're homesick to an actual survey that's where students respond on a Likert scale around anxiety. And based on their responses, then based on their scores, they'll get guidance towards the appropriate campus resources. So here are some of the results that we've recognized since we've been using the app. So I did a pretty large retention analysis a couple of years ago using 54 predictive variables of first-year student success. Not surprisingly, the biggest predictor of college success was high school GPA, and we expected that because that's what literature has told us is the biggest predictor for years. But the thing that really stood out to us was the number one predictor, or the number two predictor for our student population, and this is all the students that were in the study, and I think I had about 2,500 students in this, was participation in study tables. So that was the second biggest predictor of student success. Number three was their test scores coming in, so that wasn't surprising. But the number four driver predictor of their success was whether or not they downloaded the app. It had nothing to do with what they did in the app or how they used the app. It was just whether or not they downloaded it. So this is just a screenshot to tell you about what students say about the app. 88% of our students feel like they belong to the university community while they're using the app. And I think that's really significant because we are considered a commuter school, and we have a lot of students in the past who have said that they really didn't feel a connection to our institution. 90% of our students say the app helped them get off to a good start. And then these are our engagement results. So from last year, we had 775,000 app sessions last year. On average, each student uses the app 943 times throughout the year. There were 165 total conversations. So that's not just a single comment, that's the entire, encompasses the whole conversation that took place. And there were over 8,000 friendships formed in the app last year. And we've estimated that we've saved about 344 hours of admin time by crowdsourcing of student questions, because students are really good on that campus wall about asking and then answering students correctly.